The last 4 hours, the only thing I did was prepare this parsha class. Mamish. Now, that makes me utterly crazy. But there's a little bit of a catch. I'll tell you what the catch is. I love what I do. There was the classes I give, I don't give because I have to, I give because I choose to. If I wanted to give a parsha class, I'm not prepared, just take an old one. Just do the same stuff over and over again, it's not a problem. I like to teach original material because I love the effort, I love the test. But I'm not going to deny it. I do like the idea that I get to put stuff on my website. And I have things that I've been dreaming to have opportunity to teach for many, many years. I've had a fantasy for many years to teach something, and I decided to do it this year. I'm not going to finish it this year, but I'll start it this year. And that is, I want to teach all 12 Shvatim. In our parsha, 11 sons and a daughter are born to Yaakov and his 4 wives. And in Parshas Vayishlach, Binyamin is born. Each one of these 12 boys has a name. Each one of these 12 boys has a personality. Each one of these 12 boys is represented in the Torah by a series of indicators which give you a sense of who he is. So I'll tell you what the research is. I'll tell you what I did today. I made copies of Mikras Gedolos, of Rabbeinu Bechaya that's not in the Mikras Gedolos, of my best friend, the Torah Shleima, and Chassidus, of Parshas Vayetze's mention of all 12 Shvatim, Parshas Vayishlach's mention of all 12 Shvatim, Parshas Vayechi, Yaakov Avinu gives a bracha to each of the 12 Shvatim, the beginning of Shmois, Parshas Tetzaveh, where each one of the 12 Shvatim is associated with a stone, with a different diamond, and the Rabbeinu Bechaya, one of my favorite things, gives you an insight into the meaning of each one of the 12 stones, why it's connected to each one of the 12 Shvatim, it brings out the character of each one of the 12 Shvatim. And then finally, the Dgolim, the flags in the beginning of Bamidbar that are associated with each one of the 12 Shvatim, and then the Barachas of Moshe Rabbeinu and V'zeis HaBarach. So how many sources do I have? Primary sources do I have? I have Vayetze, I have Vayishlach, I have Vayechi, I have Shmois, I have Tetzaveh, I have Bamidbar and Habracha. 7 different sections in the Torah where basically each of the 12 of the names of the Shvatim are mentioned, their personality is brought forward, and they're explained. So this week's topic is Reuven, as he's found in our parsha, as he's mentioned in Parshas Vayishlach, as he's mentioned in Parshas Vayechi, Shmois, Tetzaveh, Bamidbar, V'zeis HaBarach. That's my topic. Now, Reuven is the oldest. Reuven, Yaakov Avinu has a son named Reuven. Reuven is the oldest. And personally, I feel like he's held to a very, very high standard. Yaakov has no mercy on him. Yaakov has a very, very high expectation of Reuven, especially when you're in Rashi. That the Aveda that Reuven supposedly did, allegedly did, presumably did, was simply take a bed of his father that he placed in the tent of Bilhah, who was Leah's, who's Rachel's Shifcha, and move it into the tent of his father Leah. And Yaakov Avinu won't forgive him for this terrible Aveda. Reuven, remember, was the one who tried to save Yosef HaTzadik's life. He says to put him in a pit. Reuven goes off to fast, to do tshuva for the Aveda, build with Yaviv. When he comes back, it's too late. The brothers have already sold Yosef HaTzadik, and Reuven is held accountable for that because he's the oldest. So I feel like Reuven, this just before I get to any of the Mefarshim, Reuven is held to an incredibly high standard. If I have to put it in very grubba, I think Yankov picks on Reuven. I think in Torah B'chlal the Torah picks on Reuven. Because it was an incredibly great neshama, and the expectation on him was that he should be perfect. And the minor mistakes that he's made are held against him and he's never forgiven for. My cliche is, my one-liner is, there are certain people the Eibishter loves and certain people the Eibishter picks on. The Eibishter's favorites are Avraham Avinu and David HaMelech. They can do no wrong. Avraham Avinu and David HaMelech are Hashem's favorites. Who does the Eibishter pick on? This is my personal list. I'm sure you can find with your own list. Adam Rishon, Reuven ben Yankov, and Shaul ben Kish. The Eibishter holds them to such a high standard. They do the smallest thing wrong and the rest of history never forgives them. Shaul, if you study the life of Shaul HaMelech, it's so not fair. He didn't want the Melucha, it was shoved down his throat, and he's punished for what? For what? For the tiniest of Avedas. David does much bigger Avedas, in quotes, and he's forgiven, and Shaul is never forgiven. And I think it's the same thing. They're the first. The opposite, they're very high nisham, very high, very special high nishamas. But if I may use these words, and this is sort of my inclination, is these very, very holy neshamas are not so grounded. It's certainly true of Shaul, and I think in a way it's true of Reuven. This is why they make their mistake, and this is why the Eibishter holds them to such a high standard. But I feel bad for Reuven. I really feel bad for Reuven. Reuven was the oldest, and he ends up with nothing. Reuven's greatest claim to fame that he participated in the machlokes of Koirach. Oil Rosh of Oil Shcheinei, Rashi says. Now, the Midrashim say, there's so much to say. I mean, I have so much here. It's unbelievable how much material I have here. But there are certain threads, I guess, that you could say that run through it all. Number one, you can learn Chitas. I mean, today's only Sunday, right? Today's Chitas with Rashi is very, very long. It's just very long Rashis. But it's only Sunday, right? We're going to get a Monday and a Tuesday and a Wednesday and a Thursday until the children are all born. And what becomes kind of apparent as we go is that Yankov loves Rachel. He doesn't like Leah. It had to be very, very difficult. To be Leah must have been a very, very difficult thing. Now you understand that Yankov was a big tzaddik, so the whole business of having a favorite is a very, very weird phenomena. And of course, in Chassidus it's explained, and in Kabbalah it's explained that Yankov's love for Rachel was a spiritual thing. She was a better wife for him. Leah was a ganz feine Frau, you know what I'm saying? Rachel brought her into the house, right? Yankov and Rachel made simanim. Rachel gives the simanim to Leah, so Yankov shouldn't know who he's marrying. He takes Leah into the house. He finds out the next morning that he married the wrong wife, complains, waits a week, and he marries Rachel. So the Torah says, "Vayara lekim kisnu Leah." Hashem sees that Leah is hated. Vayiftach es rachma v'Rachel hakara. The Eibishter opens up her rechem. The Leah conceives, she has children, and Rachel remains infertile, barren. Now remember, all of these 11 boys and one girl, are born in a span of 7 years, which means the pregnancies are quite short, especially Leah. Leah has 7 kids in 6 years. 7 kids in 6 years is a lot of kids. 7 children in 7 years. But she has a break in the middle. She has 4, and then she stops, and then she has 3 more. So the children were born rather quickly. In the 7 years, that the first 7 years, Yankov is waiting to marry Rachel. Then Reuven tricks him, so he marries Leah. Then 1 week later, he marries Rachel. And then the next 7 years, all the children are born, including Dina, including Yosef. And then he spent 6 more years working for sheep, during which time he has no more children. And when they're traveling home, as Rachel is dying, Binyamin is born. Or to say it alternatively, as Binyamin is born, Rachel is dying. So there are 12 kids, 11 boys and a girl, that are born in a span of 7 years. Leah has 7 children. So the Medrash says that Leah was not loved. However you explain Yankov is not loving her, because you cannot say that Yankov's relationship with Leah is like an ordinary man. They push it not nice to her. Yankov was first of all, he was not a young kid. He was 84 years old. And the idea that he didn't love Leah as much as Rachel was a subtlety, but Leah was quite aware of it. So the Eibishter says, I'm going to give Leah children. Leah has a bunch of kids. Now let's add one more detail to this. The other detail is that Leah knew that there's going to be 4 wives and 12 sons. So the moment she has her 4th, the moment Leah has her first boy, Leah realizes, I'm ahead of the game. If there's only going to be 12 sons and there's going to be 4 wives, I got more than my share. And she ends up getting half, right? But the oldest is Reuven. So the Lashon HaPasuk is that Vayiftach Elkim es Rachma, and Leah becomes pregnant, Vatelid Bain, and she has a little boy, and she names him Vaytikra Shmei Reuven. So the Midrashim say that when Reuven was born, he was absolutely perfect. He was gorgeous, he was strong, he was healthy. She was somehow able to see that he's smart and he's gifted. Reuven, if a person's going to have one child, this is the one to have. In other words, when Reuven is born, Leah calls him Reuven. One of the Midrashim say that She names him Reuven because she realizes that she has a really, really healthy, wonderful child, and she's celebrating the fact that her oldest is so physically and spiritually extraordinary. Reuven. That's what it says in the Medrash. Rashi says that the Reu doesn't go on the boy. Rashi goes on Leah. The Chumash says that Hashem saw that I'm suffering, so He gave me a son. But the Medrash says that Leah names him Reuven, not because Hashem saw my suffering, but because he's such a healthy, such a wonderful child, such a wonderful, wonderful child. Another thing which Rashi also brings is that when Reuven is born, Leah sees into his future. What does she see into his future? That being the Bechor, being the firstborn is very important to him. Being the firstborn is very important to him. He doesn't give it up. And when Yaakov Avinu takes it away from him, and gives it to Yosef, he doesn't hold a grudge, he's not jealous, and in fact protects Yosef. In other words, Reuven has two characteristics. The Lashon in Rashi is Reuven b'ni leban Chamid. Look at the difference between my son and my father-in-law's son, my brother-in-law Esav. Esav was given the birthright, he sold it, he didn't want it. My son has the birthright, he doesn't want to give it up. It's going to be taken from him. It's going to be taken from him against his wishes. And he's going to protect the brother who took it from him. So the milas of Reuven are considerable. A, he wanted the Bechayra. B, when it was taken from him, he honors the fact that the Bechayra was taken from him. And he protects Yosef Atzad. These are all the wonderful characteristics of Reuven. There are a couple of other things that are really, really worthwhile to point out. And one of them is very, very important. And I think it's even the slichas of Tzem Gedalia. Reuven is considered one of history's best Baalei Tshuva. Reuven is considered one of the world's greatest doers of tshuva. There are many people who did tshuva. If you remember the slichas, I'm not going to hold it against you. The Tzem Gedalia is slichas. Tzem Gedalia is a fast day, but it's a status to make tshuva. It's on all the people who did tshuva. It's not a very long list. It's Ninveh's Goyim. I think it mentions Achov, but one of the few people on that list, the people who did tshuva, I think Cain is on that list. One of the people who's famous for having done tshuva was Reuven. Reuven was accused of doing an avera. Maybe he did an avera. But Reuven's tshuva is extraordinary. It's very, very amazing. And it's considered one of the greatest characteristics of Reuven, the fact that Reuven did tshuva. In fact, it's brought that the stone on the Choshe Mishpat that has Shevet Reuven is called Oidem. It's very bright red. And one of the reasons is that color. And then later on, the flag of his Shevet, there were, according to some of Machon, 12 flags. Even though there was only one flag for each 3 Shvatim, but each Shevet had their own flag. Reuven's flag is also bright red, because his face turns crimson, his face turns red from shame in his doing tshuva. And it's considered one of the greatest attributes of Reuven, that Reuven did tshuva. I found an absolutely delicious siponu, a beautiful siponu. I love it. It says in Pashas Vayishlach, which is next week. Vayishkav Reuven is Bila Pelegesh Aviv Vayu B'nei Yankiv Shnei Masa. Reuven B'chei Yisrael. It's very, very strange. Reuven does an avera, and if you read the pasuk literally, he did a very big avera. Vayishkav is Bila Pelegesh Aviv, and the next words are, and Yankov has 12 sons, and then it says Reuven is the oldest. So the Rishonim will talk about this, the Midrashim will talk about this, that even though Reuven does this Aveda, and again, the Gemara says by a Mishnah, by a Soita, that you tell him the Ma'aseh of Reuven Kipshute, we assume, Rashi says, that Reuven's Aveda was actually very small. He was Bilbul Yitzul Yadav. He simply moved the bed from one tent to another tent, from Bilah's tent to Leah's tent, but it's considered a very, very big Aveda. But he did a little Aveda or a big Aveda. In the same sentence, you say, Reuven does an Aveda, Yaakov has 12 sons, and the oldest is Reuven. So some of the Mefarshim say, the Medrashim say, for example, Reuven should have been kicked out, but you don't mess, forgive me for saying something politically incorrect, you don't mess with Gesh. The Medrash says, it's very hard for the Eibush to be Oike Yuchsan. He loses what's called B'chayra L'mamein, the birthright for money he loses, but B'chayra as the firstborn he doesn't lose. So all the Mefarshim talk about the fact that Reuven does this big Aveda, and he should lose his birthright, but he doesn't lose his birthright because the Eibush doesn't want to take it away from him, and so on and so forth. The Siparnus says something absolutely delicious, unbelievable thing. And listen to this. The only one of the Mefarshim who says this. This is not the Siparnus. The Ravi Haradak. The Radak's no. The Siparnus. The Siparnus says this is one of my favorite ideas. I just came across it. I didn't notice until now. The Siparnus is one of the Rishonim on Chumash. The Siparnus says Reuven does a big aveda, and he deserves to be kicked out. He certainly deserves to lose his birthright. But Reuven does tshuva. Reuven does tshuva. And tshuva is so powerful that it reaches until the Kisi HaKavod, and the Eibishter forgives him. And that's why the Torah says Reuven does an Aveda, and the same sentence. Yaakov has 12 sons, and Reuven is the oldest. Reuven does tshuva, the Eibishter forgives him. What's the problem? Listen to this. If a person does a terrible Aveda, the worst Aveda in the Torah you can imagine, and there are witnesses that witness him doing the Aveda, and they warned him, right? It's an oynish, it's a punishment. Whatever, skila, sreifa, heri, there's all kinds of content of doing an Aveda, right? What if a person does tshuva? A person worshipped idols, Rachmana litzlan, and he was warned that if he's going to worship idols, he's going to get this and this oynish, which is usually skila. And he does the Aveda anyway, and he's supposed to be put to death by stoning, and he does tshuva. How does that work? It works as follows. Hashem forgives him, but the Bezdin can't. Hashem forgives him because Adam Hashem Yirah Lalivav. The Eibush could see into the heart. So here's what happens. In Pashas Vayishlach, Reuven does a terrible Aveda, but in Pashas Vayishlach, Hashem is judging him. Havaya Lilivav, Hashem sees into the heart. So Reuven does this terrible Aveda, but the Eibush sees that Reuven does tshuva, and Reuven is so forgiven, it's like it didn't happen. In Pashas Vayechi, Yankov is judging him. Yankov is a man of the flesh. Now you have to assume that Yankov Avinu had Ruach HaKodesh, and Yankov Avinu knew that Reuven did tshuva, but Yankov is a judge on the physical level, and the halacha is that Ein L'dayin Ela Masha Ein Avreis, the judge has to receive his eyes, so Yaakov Avinu takes away all of Reuven's rights. According to the Midrashim, he loses 3 rights. B'choira, Kahuna, Melucha. He had the right as the firstborn, which means he gets double in financial interests and other things. He should have been the father of all the Kohanim. He should have been father of all the Malachim. There's different opinions in the Midrashim, but it seems to be the majority of the Midrashim hold Reuven lost 3 things because of this Aveda. So here you have a fascinating story. In the Chumash, in Pashas Vayishlach, Reuven does Aveda, and the Torah says immediately, Hashem forgives him because Hashem sees his tshuva and the Eibush forgives his tshuva, but Yaakov doesn't. Because Yaakov Avinu is a physical person, and he has to judge by physical laws. He sees with his eyes. He cannot see what's going on in Reuven's heart, even though he probably knew quite well, because Yaakov Avinu was not a fool. That Reuven did tshuva. Sanhedrin cannot, what's the word I'm looking for? Parlay. Sanhedrin cannot commute a person's sentence because he did tshuva. It doesn't work that way. In American law, you can commute somebody's sentence if you do good behavior, if you show real remorse, and so on and so forth. But the halacha in Torah is the person does a crime, has to be punished. There's no such thing as tshuva. So the Torah tells us the Eibishter forgives Reuven and Yaakov doesn't. The Torah tells us the Eibishter forgave Reuven because Reuven did tshuva. Yaakov may have known that Reuven did tshuva, but because of the Aved that Reuven did, he loses B'chayra, he loses Melucha, he loses Kahuna. This is the story of Reuven. And there's one more thing which I find fascinating. And this is sort of you could almost say that's a machlokes in Kabbalah. It really comes out of machlokes in Kabbalah. I'm going to give it to you using a form, a Machon. If you look at a person's face, what do you see? I'm going to give you 2 on those. That's a great answer. That's a very good answer. Yeah? I'm going to give you 2 answers. Answer number 1, nothing. Answer number 2, everything. Which is why, and again, I'm not giving you all the nuts and bolts of this, but when you look at the Kabbalah of the early Rishonim, the Ramban, the Rabbeinu Bechaya, and others, when the Torah uses the word face, they translate face as mask. Do not have another God on my face. My face means a mask. Where Hashem is hidden, you shouldn't have another God. They translate the face as something which conceals. In Chassidus, same word is explained to the opposite extreme. That we say Chochmas Adam Torah upon. If you look at a person's face, you see the very, very essence. And they're both true. From one hand, you look at someone else, you don't see anything. On the other hand, looking at a person's face, you can know more about them than by any other medium. I'll tell you a very sweet story. Thursday night, after I left here, I went to Empire Stiebel, where a shtickl Fabrengen. And the person leading the Fabrengen was a younger man. He's older than I am, much older. He was my teacher many years ago. His name is Rabbi Yossi Paltiel. If you look at the old Torah, Fitcher Pevzner. And he told a story. He told an interesting story, and I think it's a very beautiful. It's the first opportunity I have to tell it, and I'm happy that I had this opportunity. There was a Yid who lived in our generation whose name was Rabbi Shmuel Levitin. Rabbi Shmuel Levitin. He died in the summer of 1974, which means that he's in Gan Eden for over 48 years. When he passed away, the Rebbe went to his funeral till the cemetery. The Rebbe had a lot of respect for him. He died, he was 91 years old, Berech. He was named after the Rebbe Marash. He was born within a year of the Marash passing, and he was 90 years later. Rabbi Shmuel was to some people controversial. Some people didn't like him. But the relationship the Rebbe had with Shmuel had no equal. The Rebbe Bechlal was not close to anyone. The Rebbe was very distant. The Rebbe was not close to anybody. The biggest Hasidim felt that Rebbe was distant from them. The one exception was Rabbi Shmuel. Rebbe used to chat with Rabbi Shmuel. Shmuel's like I'm talking to you. Rebbe used to ask him questions, engage in conversations. And Rabbi Shmuel was the Rebbe's Rav. He was the Rebbe's Rav. And the Rebbe would often ask him shaylas. And Rabbi Shmuel used to say, when the Rebbe asks me a shayla, he knows the halacha. So why does he ask me knows the halacha? So first was the tradition in Beis Harav that you ask a Rav and you don't trust yourself, whatever the particulars were. But there's something else. Sometimes the Rebbe wanted the Rav to give a particular psak. The Rebbe would ask Rabbi Shmuel a shayla because he wanted Rabbi Shmuel to give him the psak that he wanted. Meaning, you could paskin like this, and you could paskin like this, and you could paskin like this. And Rabbi Shmuel had to guess what the Rebbe is thinking and paskin the way the Rebbe wanted. Now, of course, he couldn't make up a psak which against Shulchan Aruch. He had to paskin that the Rebbe wanted, assuming that this was written in Shulchan Aruch, which is very tricky. L'mashal, a simple example. The Rebbe came into Shul to daven, and in the middle of davening, a chassan walked in. So the first part of the Rebbe said Tachnun. Now the chassan walks in, he can't say Tachnun. So the Rebbe says, we have to ask it off. So he turned to Rabbi Shmuel, what should we do? And the Shmuel says, let the chassan leave the building. So Shmuel explained, I understood from the question, the Rebbe knows what halach is, that the Rebbe didn't want to have a half a davening without Tachnun, half a davening with Tachnun. It seems like a contradiction. So he asked me the question, so I understood that the answer is let the chassan leave the building, so the whole davening will be with Tachnun. So the story that I heard Thursday, that I heard before is that the Rebbe sent a question to Rabbi Shmuel. The Rebbe told Rabbi Shmuel the question. So Shmuel said, Rabbi Gron, I want to go into the Rebbe. And he went to the Rebbe all the time. He didn't have an open door, but he went in all the time. So Rabbi Gron says, why? The Rebbe asked the Shai, why do you want to go in? And you know what he said? Listen to these words. Ich will sehen, what the Rebbe will. I want to see what the Rebbe wants. The Rebbe sent me a shayla. I got it. I want to go into the Rebbe. I want to look at him. Ich will sehen, what the Rebbe will. I want to see what the Rebbe wants. That's what the face tells you. And he went into the Rebbe, who was a big pikech. He was famous for being very, very astute. Shmuel Levitin used to say, everybody figures it out. The smart guy figures it out the first time. And he was the smart guy. He always knew what the Rebbe wanted. And he gave the psak that the Rebbe needed. But that's a beautiful story. I want to go into the Rebbe. I want to see what the Rebbe wants. Ich will sehen, what the Rebbe will. So a face of a person can either be defined as a mask, or a face of a person can be defined as a maximum revealer. So now, Rabbi Yossi, if the face of the person either can be seen as something which hides or reveals, let's talk about the sense of seeing, vision. Right? Who knows more, someone who sees something or someone who hears something? So on the surface, seeing is better than hearing. Right? A crime is committed and you're a witness. You know exactly what happened. But it's also conceivable you're completely misled because your eyes give you a version of the story that does not allow you to see the nuance. What happened before? What other players were involved? And on and on and on and on. Sometimes the person who sees very clearly something, but it blinds him to the other facts and it makes his judgment flawed. Meaning to say, the judge is not going to test this eyewitness alone. He's going to call in other people. They're going to call in some circumstantial evidence. They're going to do personality profiles. And you put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Sometimes you find out that what the guy saw is true. But you can't make a judgment based on that because what that person saw, because he saw it, seeing is such a strong sense that it can have a chasarn also. When you see something, you have no ability to judge what you saw with a discrimination because you just saw it. If you see something, no one can tell you didn't see it. But sometimes you literally saw wrong because you saw a part of a story. You didn't see all of it. So you have a machlokes the Mekubalim. The Rabbeinu Bechaya says that the first 4 sons of Leah, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, are the 10 Sfiris, and Reuven is the lowest. Maimonides Chassidus say that the first 4 sons of Leah, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, are the 10 Sfiris, and Reuven is the highest. The early Mekubalim, this Kabbalah of the Rishonim, Rabbeinu Bechaya lived 700 years ago. It's a long, from a perspective of Kabbalah, it's a very long time ago. That the Reuven is the madrega of seeing. When you see something, the surface is very clear, but beneath the surface you have nothing. You can make a good argument, you're better off not seeing. You want to collect data, you want to collect evidence, and if you have to search for the evidence, you have to look for the evidence, what you find will be more accurate. So the Rabbeinu Bechaya says Reuven represents seeing, and because when you see something, you're so certain about what you saw, it's skin deep, it's all you got. Chassidus says, no, Reuven is the maximum sense. Reuven is chokhmah, Reuven is chesed. When you see with maximum clarity, And of course, the two go together. On the one hand, when you see, what you see can blind you. But on the other one, if you have depth, what you see, you look at a person's face, you can know more about a person than if you read 100 pages about them, of research and collection of data and so on and so forth, because a person's face reflects their essence. Reuven, his name is Reuven, see a son. And one of the ideas which is discussed about Reuven is that his character is the power of seeing. The ma'ila of seeing and the chesed thing. Reuven sees very clearly. Reuven sees God very clearly. But because he sees God very clearly, from one angle you say, he sees God very clearly, but he sees only the surface, and he doesn't have any capacity to go beneath the surface, because once you see something, you're not going to study it. On the other hand, you can make the argument that Reuven sees so clearly and so deeply that he has the deepest connection to the Eibush, because seeing is believing. Which is why you'll find in Chassidus that Reuven is connected to Ahava and Shimon, who we'll talk about the next time, officially next week. And next week should be a class, is Yira, because Reuven sees. And when you see God, you're drawn to have a love for Hashem. Shimon doesn't see, Shimon only hears. And hearing means your relation with Eibush is more remote. So it creates a relationship of Yira. We'll talk about Shimon and we'll talk about Yira next week. But these are two sides of Reuven's character. Reuven sees. Pardon me, the upside of seeing is you see very clearly. The downside of seeing is seeing very superficially. And whether you're the upside or downside depends on you. If you have greater depth and you see, you get to the very essence of something and it makes you desire to be close to it. If you're very shallow and superficial, you see it and it allows it to become, the ma'ila becomes a chassadim. The fact that it came to you so easy works against you. I'll give you an example. I know people who have a very easy time with Aramaic. Language is easy for them. So they can learn a Gemara much easier than I can, because I struggle very much with the words. But somebody else understands it much better. They just read and translate exactly what it says. They know exactly where to put the punctuation, where the commas go, the periods go. They can read a page of Gemara, translate each word. A Jew once told me and Mechavrusa, he tells me what it says and I tell him what it means. Because sometimes seeing could be a chassadim. Reuven seeing could be seen as a chassadim, and Reuven seeing could be seen as a gavaldik hamayla. Now, to move on, another thought, as I mentioned to you before, Reuven is the head of a camp. The Jewish people are 12 Shvatim. But they're divided up into 4 groups, and the 4 groups are called the Golim. They're called 4 flags. Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun are the flag that is in Mizrach, in the east. Reuven, Shimon, and Gad is the flag that's in the south, in Dorim. And then there's Menashe, Ephraim, and Benjamin, and there's God, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Menashe and Benjamin are in the west, Dan, Naphtali is in the north. So, Reuven is the head of a degel, meaning there's 3 Shvatim under one flag. The flag of Reuven represents all 3 of his Shvatim, and I already mentioned to you that his flag was red. And there's another thing which I forgot to mention, which is a good idea to mention now. On his flag was the image of a person, of an Adam. Now, why does Reuven have the image of an Adam? As a human being, as opposed to a lion, right? And Aryeh, and Nesher, and Shoyer. The 4 faces of the Merkava. Adam, Rishon, Reuven has Adam, and Yehuda has Aryeh. Even though Yehuda L'chayr is the best of the 3 of the 4 Degalim, Reuven has Pnei Adam, the face of a person. Why? Because in our parsha, one of the stories that you have is the story of the Dudoim. It's such a little detail in the story, people just skip it. Reuven's a kid, right? His father's busy with a shepherd. His mothers are having babies, like it's going out of style. He takes a walk. And he goes out into the wilderness and he collects flowers. And Rashi points out that he went dafka into the wilderness. It was make tir chitim. All the fields were full of produce. He doesn't steal. He was raised to be a son of Yankov Avinu, a son of Yitzchak Avinu. He doesn't steal. He goes out into the wilderness. And what does he bring back? He brings back a flower that's called jasmine. Jasmine has the property that it helps for fertility. It says in the Mefarshim that this jasmine has 3 properties. Number 1, if a woman is pregnant, it protects her from losing her pregnancy. Number 2, a woman in childbirth who's having difficulty delivering the baby, jasmine will help to deliver easily. And number 3, jasmine helps women conceive. Women can't get pregnant, so jasmine has this property. I don't know how you explain this in science. It's a philosophical thing, it's a mythological thing. And part of the reason is because jasmine the shape of the flower looks like the face of a little boy, a little child, a little baby. So Reuven goes out into the field and he finds these dudoim and he brings them home, and you know what happens, right? Rachel asks Reuven for the dudoim. Why does Rachel ask Reuven for the dudoim? Because she has no children. And she figures it's good for fertility. So she doesn't go to Reuven herself. She goes to Leah. Give me your son's... So Leah says, excuse me, our husband lives with you permanently. And you want to take the Dudoim as well? So Rachel allows Leah to spend more time with Yankov Avinu, and she has 2 more children. Because of this chus. So the Dudoim, this flower, which is called jasmine, which has a property of fertility, is the trademark of Reuven. In other words, Reuven is a person who can help people have children. Achei Temimim. That's what it says in the Sfarim. I want to say something a little bit more mystical, and that is that when it says that the Merkava has 4 faces, the chariot of Hashem has 4 faces, and one of the 4 faces, the faces of a man, of a person, that does not mean the nefesh elokis, that means the nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual soul. On Reuven's flag, the flag is red and the images of a human face. That denotes, in other words, Reuven, one of his properties is that he's a cold intellectual. The nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual soul, is neither animal nor God. Right? The animal soul loves passionate things. The divine soul loves transcendent things. The intellectual soul cares about truth. That's it. Cold, absolute ideas. One of the characteristics of Reuven, based on this idea that the Reuven's flag has the face of an Adam, is nefesh hasichlis. Reuven is a theoretical person who looks at ideas absolutely objectively and intellectually. It's one of the characteristics of Reuven. And of course, you know how Chassidus talks about the intellectual soul. The intellectual soul can seek truth, but the intellectual has to be protected because the animal soul wants to make him into an animal, and the godly soul wants to raise him. And you have to be careful that the intellectual soul should remain what it is. Or to say it in plain words, Reuven is an Adam, he's a mensch. And his challenge is to remain a mensch, that he shouldn't be dragged down into losing his menschhood and into becoming an animal. But there's one other thing that I want to share, and I guess I'll close with this, and that is, before Yankov passes away, Yankov calls his 12 sons and says, I do not want the Goyim to carry my remains. But Yankov Avinu insists on being buried in Eretz Yisrael. Then, not to remain in Mitzrayim, when the Yidden leave, they'll take his remains with them, like Yosef. Right? So Yosef also dies in Mitzrayim. But Yosef's remains are put in a casket, and they're saved in Mitzrayim, and when Yidden have to leave, the Yidden find his remains wherever they were buried at sea. Moshe Rabbeinu takes a golden plate, he puts it in a lishay, they pull out his remains, and they schlep it as well. But Yankov insists on being buried when Yosef is still king, right away. So he says to his 12 sons, listen, hundreds and thousands of people, what are they called in America? They're called pallbearers, right? It's considered an honor. He said, I don't want anybody touching me except you 12. 12 sons, but he makes an immediate arrangement. Levi shouldn't touch his remains because Levi is the father of the Kohanim. Yosef should not touch his remains because Yosef is a king. And instead you should have Menashe Ephraim. And he tells them where to stand. Yehud Yisachar Zvulun stand at my head. Menashe Ephraim and Benjamin stand at my feet. Reuven, Shimon and Gad stand to my right, to the south. And Dan, Naphtali and Asher stand to my left, which is to the north. Reuven's degel is to the south of the Beis HaMikdash. Now when you're facing east, the south is the right side. When you're facing Mizrach, right? This is Mizrach, that's the south. That's the north. What's the difference between the north and the south? What's the difference between the north and the south? So the Gemara says that if you want to get rich, go to the north. Hareisha lahashir yatzmin, you want to get rich, you go to the north. If you want to get wise, you go to the south. Hareisha lahachkim yadrim. V'simnoch, the proof of this is Shulchan b'tzafon amanei b'darim. In the Beis Hamikdash, on the northern side, the left side, if you're facing east, was the shulchan with the table which had bread, which was the basis of parnasa, and on the right side, on the southern side, if you're facing east, was the menorah. And the menorah is the source of chokhmah. So Reuven is situated on the southern side, on the right side. In other words, this is Mizrach, that's the right side, because his characteristic is chokhmah. This is consistent with what I said to you before, that the human face on his degel represents nefesh hasichlis. He was considered an abstract intellectual, but it's also connected to midas hachesed, to kindness. And it says in one of the midrashim on the Chazal that the reason Reuven is placed on the southern side is, first of all, because Reuven's a nice guy. Reuven's a very nice guy. He's a nice guy, as represented by how he treated Yosef HaTzadik and by a variety of other indicators which I'll get to momentarily. And also because Reuven did tshuva, and his tshuva was accepted. Again, the same idea. That Reuven was zeicha to an unbelievable chesed of Hashem, that he did tshuva, and his tshuva was forgiven. Like I told you before, the Siponu, I love this Siponu, I think the Siponu is worth $1 million. Reuven doesn't have Aveda, he's never punished by the Eibishter, because the Eibishter knows he's clean, he did tshuva. Yankov punishes him, because Yankov Avinu is in din, Bezdin in this world, and you can't judge what's going on in the heart. Reuven does tshuva, the Eibish accepts his tshuva, and Reuven is on the right side to indicate that the Eibish that accepted his tshuva and that he has the maila of chesed. It also says that from Reuven comes Gashmi's de Parnasa, even though the northern side, which is the left, is connected to Parnasa. It says that from Reuven comes Tal, which means dew, and Geshem, which means rain. Reuven is the source of all kinds of blessing. So, I just told you a bunch of facts. If you add it all up, what is Reuven? Reuven is smart. Reuven is about tshuva. I guess you could say Reuven is good and kind. And he's not considered the best. He's not considered the best. All of his rights as the best are taken from him. So if you study Reuven, what do you take? What do you take of all the different characteristics of Reuven? Reuven should have been perfect. But he wasn't perfect. And because he wasn't perfect, he's, in quotes, punished. But he makes the best of it. Meaning, for a person who's told, you failed, Reuven doesn't quit. He does tshuva, and he maximizes the opportunities that he has to be as close to the Eibush as he could possibly be. I think everything I just said for the last, 40 minutes, that's long the shir has been going on, that's what it amounts to. Reuven was expected to be perfect. He didn't turn out perfect. But Reuven doesn't quit. Reuven doesn't say, well, if I can't get this, and this, forget the whole business. He does everything in his power to maximize what he could possibly be. And the Eibishter forgives him. The Eibishter forgives him. The Eibishter sees his virtue. Okay, that's my class. So what's going to happen is each week we're doing one. This is Reuven, next week is Shimon. I'll see you when I see you. Okay, good.